Well, every conversation my brother and I have ever had when we were broke somehow revolved around money. And we've run many businesses that did well for a little bit, then failed. We've tried to launch projects using the last of our money.
And you were
that
always
have
doing
failed.
this together, right?
Always together. Mm-hmm. I couldn't have imagined it any other way. We tried to bring various drinks we liked from Eastern Europe to sell in UK supermarkets, set up meetings, invested all of our last money in this project. Everyone told us no, failed. We had this idea once to set up a system where people could run, remember those competitions, or win a vacation, text this to this number. We tried to middleman that and allow other people to run text competitions on a premium rate phone line that we set up. And we set it up and tried to market it, lost all of our money. Once again, we were broke eating ramen noodles. So we've tried everything. I mean, we've done all sorts of failed and successful businesses over the years. And I think it was just persistence that got us there. A lot of people are going to get, kicked in the nuts and take a fall, and they're going to let it beat them down. Andrew's lost very important kickboxing matches. Did he quit fighting then? Did I quit fighting when I got my ass kicked a couple times? No, you don't. You just have to continue, because in life, there are only winners and losers. There are no participation trophies. There's no, stickers and everyone's invited to have a good time. Life is hard, and everyone in life is actually trying to play the same game.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. Get a commission-only sales job. Get a sales job that offers you no basic salary, because it teaches you lots of things. One, the art of sales and closing the deal and actually bringing money in is very important. But two, it teaches you work ethic and hunger. Because when I worked commission-only sales jobs, it was a matter of, I'm not going to eat unless I sell these windows. And, I'd take a 3-hour drive down to whichever house I was going to give the presentation in. I'd sit there, stare in the mirror, splash some water on my face, snap into sales mode, knock on the door, and then make my presentation. I was very, very good. And yeah, sales is a skill that Andrew and I have even to this day, but you have to understand absolutely everything, from the camera that's recording me to the chair I'm sitting on to this wooden paneling. There's somebody in every single company that makes everything that is somehow in charge of sales and marketing. So just think about things. Think about the items around you in the room. Think about the items you use every day. When you go and buy something, why did you buy it? Why did you buy it, and who convinced you to buy it? You could be ordering a coffee from Starbucks. Why? Why are you ordering the coffee from Starbucks? Who behind the desk of Starbucks HQ all those years ago sat and came up with the strategy that made you know what the brand is about and go there and actually buy their coffee? Obviously, boycott Starbucks, but that's just an example. But think about it when you buy things. Think about your reason for buying them. And then your mind will start thinking a lot more like a salesman. Yeah, if you're leaving university or high school, sales is definitely the field you should get into. It's the field you should get into, because no matter what you learn and no matter what skill set you actually develop on top of sales, you have to convince people to use your product or service one way or another. Andrew and I are very good at sales, but anything you learn inside of the real world, even, whether it be AI content creation, that's all well and good, and you could be the best in the world. But if you can't convince people to use your service and actually pay you money to do the things that you're good at, then it doesn't matter. It's all for nothing. So you should definitely get into sales.
If you want something, buy it today. Genuinely, if you want something, buy it today. Everybody plans their life as though they're going to live to 70, 80. A lot of you are wrong about that. A lot of you will die in your 30s and 40s. That's just human nature. I had this discussion with a young friend of mine named Alex a couple years ago when he was talking about buying Bitcoin. He had about $25,000, about one Bitcoin at the time. And he said, Tristan, I've always wanted a BMW and I've always wanted a nice fast car. I don't have it. He's the guy who I then bought a Lamborghini, but I digress. Or should I buy a Bitcoin? This was his question. And I said, you know what, Alex? You're 19 years old and you can't get your dick sucked in the backseat of a Bitcoin. And what I meant by that, as vulgar of an example as it was, is that you can buy crypto at your age. Maybe you're watching this and you're 17, 21, 25, and you could save for the future, plan for the future, and think maybe when I'm 35, I'll have all those things I've ever dreamed of. The ideal situation is to do both. Have all the things you've ever dreamed of and buy some cryptocurrency. But essentially nobody cares when you get to 45, 50. If you save your Bitcoin now and you're a billionaire at 50, then you get a Lamborghini, then you get a Bentley and a Rolls Royce and a boat. You're just some 50-year-old man with money. Nobody cares. When you're young, is impressive. That's why I'm going to have a super yacht before I turn 40. That's why I had an Aston Martin when I was 21 years old. That's why I have a Bugatti when I was, when did I get that? 32, 31. I have not just purchased the most expensive lifestyle items in the world, which I massively enjoy, plus are a big show-off factor. I did it at the right age. I did it at a very young age, and it's always more impressive. If I meet a 50-year-old man and he shakes my hand, he's got a Rolex on his wrist, it's a completely different feeling than when a 20-year-old reaches out his hand to shake my hand and there's a Rolex on his wrist. That 20-year-old, it's not expected of him to have that Rolex, whereas with the 50-year-old it is. So my financial advice to everybody has always been the same. Spend 50% of your money as though you're going to live 50 more years, and spend 50% of your money as if you're going to live 50 more days. I call it the 50-50-50 rule, because you might live 50 more days and that might be it. And with your dying breath, laying on the side of that road after getting hit by that female driver, you'll be like, I died without ever owning a Rolex or a supercar, but I've got some Bitcoin. Nobody cares.
If you're a young man, maybe you're a member of my university, you stack some money together and you want to buy your first ever car, good for you. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Don't invest the money. If you want to buy a sports car or a supercar or a fast car, you go right ahead and do it. But the first thing you need to do is the first thing I used to do every time I bought a fancy car, is go to see your mom. Show your mom, be proud of yourself, pick her up in the car, give her a spin. There is nobody more important to show off your achievements to than your mother. So that's rule number one. If you're a student of mine and you make money and you buy a supercar, and the first thing you do is pick up some bimbo with big tits, look, that's 2, 3 on the list. But you better go see your mother and pick her up and drive her around first, or you're no student of mine.
Pitching is something that I learned on the phone. So learning it on the phone is applicable to, I guess, cold email, but not in the same way. Copywriting and phone sales are two very different arts, let's say. But I remember my first opening line when I was calling on the phone. It was, "Good afternoon, my name is Tristan Tate. I'm calling from T3 Television, and I'd like to discuss the opportunity of television advertising for your company." That was the first line that I would say on the phone. So, who I was, where I was calling from, what I wanted from them, what I wanted them to entertain the idea of. Because it was always a tantalizing carrot I'd dangle in front of them, I'd like to discuss the possibility of television advertising for your company. I was waiting then for a series of objections. So to pitch, you need to come across letting them know who you are and what you want very fast, because CEOs and people who own businesses have very little time for idiots on the phone. Objections are the key to telephone sales and face-to-face sales as well. Everyone's going to try to say no for a bunch of different reasons, and you have to be able to counter them very, very quickly. So let's take television advertising again. I'm calling to discuss the possibility of television advertising for your company. Well, that's too expensive. I can't afford television advertising. Well, do you know how much television advertising is nowadays? And they'd be like, well, no, but I imagine it's quite expensive. And I say, well, you know what? You're completely correct. You don't belittle them. You're completely correct. But your ideas are outdated, because back in the 1990s, when there were only 4 television channels to advertise on, these big media companies had a monopoly over the fact that people watch television, and only big blue chip companies could afford it. However, since the advent of cable television and the 200 plus channels you have across your home, it's given us 2 advantages. 1, the prices have come right down because there's more channels to compete with one another. And 2, you can specify exactly which demographics you want to reach with your television commercials. For example, if you're trying to sell to women and you're selling makeup, we can target Sex and the City on this channel. If you're trying to target men, then we can use 2.5 Men on Comedy Central. And you'd wow them with knowledge while overcoming their objections. So the art of pitching is to be able to turn any no, or any I don't think so, or any I'm not interested, into a question, into them being curious. And it's something that we call the desire curve. Of course, everybody wants television advertising, but they don't think it's right for their business. They don't think they can afford it. You start at 0, and the close can only be made on the graph once you get their desire high enough. That's when they say, yes, I'm happy to meet you face to face. So pitching is all about face-to-face or on the phone, in a live conversation with a person, how to deal with and overcome their objections to not wanting the product that you want to sell. Now, copywriting is a very different art, because it doesn't work like a free-flowing conversation. And I'm quite good at it, and I did a lot of the early copywriting for mine and Andrew's businesses when we first started out to sell, for example, war room memberships. I did some of it back then. However, I'm not an expert.
But you know who is an expert? The professor inside the real world. So if you want to learn 2024 sales, don't listen to me, the 36-year-old man who has a career in sales in the past and on the phone. Very, very useful skills to know and still applicable today. However, if you're looking for sales information on how to sell via email, how to copywrite, how to send cold correspondence and get clients back, then you want to be inside the real world. Graduating out of brokey land today in today's society isn't about being a millionaire, it's about having a high income. And I would put that income somewhere along the lines of $500,000 to $1 million per year in income, because that is enough to take care of all of your creature comforts, to live, to eat, to do whatever you like, to have a few nice things, even to have a nice car, and still put hundreds of thousands away every year. Hundreds of thousands is going somewhere else, into crypto, into offshore, maybe into a Dubai real estate play that you're doing. That's the only way to truly escape the matrix. I think you need $500,000 to $1 million per year. Then you're comfortable, and then you're literally no longer a brokey. You will have things that less than 1% of the population gets to have, like a second home, like a home owned outright in these days, like a fast car. If you're clearing $35,000 a month after your taxes, then you're no longer a brokey. You're not rich, you're not successful, you're not in the top 1%, you're not a baller, but you're not a brokey. 35,000 is the benchmark. A friend of mine once told me that you should always wear an expensive Swiss watch, Rolex ideally, because in a life or death situation, it will always get you on the last plane out of wherever you are. So if you're in Lebanon and you want to get on the last plane out of Lebanon, you can hand over your Rolex and jump on the plane. And that's a very good way of carrying wealth on you that isn't usually confiscated from you when, the police come and search you and raid your house, etc. Yeah, freedom, geographical freedom is very important also, because things go wrong all the time. There's famously a bunch of people in Florida now who will not leave their homes, who will not leave their boats, who will not leave Florida at all during this hurricane, which happened, I think, last night or yesterday. And the reason they're not going to leave is because that's all they've got. That house and the stuff in it and the dog living in it with them is all they've got in the world. So what, hitchhike where? To come back and find their whole lives wiped out? They'd rather stay with their stuff. They'd rather die on their hill, quite literally. And I think that geographical freedom, it is of course tied to finance. But as an American with the upcoming election, as a citizen of anywhere in the world with a political climate that's uncertain, certainly have your passport. Certainly have friends in other countries that you could stay with. Certainly keep enough money in the bank for a plane ticket. Certainly keep all of these things, in your back pocket. Because if you aren't free geographically, then you can get tied up in stupid situations politically. My brother and I preach this all the time, and ironically, we found ourselves trapped in the country of Romania. But that only happens at a really extreme level of wealth and influence where, politicians and institutions want to attack you and bring you down. There's nowhere in the world I was safe at that point. However, I'm still very, very free. I'm a very free person. Life is good. I can see any woman I want, anytime I like. I fly them in. They come and hang out with me. I see any friends I like from anywhere in the world, war room members, old school friends. They jump on planes. I fly them to me. I'm still free within my house, more so than lots of people who can go wherever they like. Because they can't go wherever they like, can they? They haven't got a passport. They haven't got any bloody money. They sit on the internet tweeting hate tweets about me and my brother about how we're constrained within the country of Romania, which is a very big, very beautiful country. But yeah, I'm very free. If I need to see my mother, private jet, she gets on the jet, she arrives here at my house via chauffeured car. I'm free to do things that a lot of people aren't, even though I'm constrained. So freedom is a interesting concept, and there's very many different ways to measure it, but it's also very important. Whatever you feel like freedom is, if you feel it's going to make you happier, it's something that you should definitely pursue. To Americans, to become more globally free, I'd say, first and foremost, fear of the unknown is what's keeping you where you are. Get a passport, get a little bit of money, go to other places. Go visit Poland, go visit Thailand, go visit Indonesia, go visit places where an American could very easily go and set up shop and live. And I would advise you to do that because as your situation gets worse in the United States, let's say Kamala Harris wins the presidency, and as things double in price and things become more violent and there's more mass migration across the southern border and your cities become unsafe, if you don't know what other countries are like, the propaganda machine on the TV telling you you're in the land of the free and the home of the brave, greatest country on earth, is going to sway you into staying in that shitty situation. Whereas if you knew the other countries, if you had been once to Poland and looked around and you thought, well, I'm a computer programmer, I could live and work here, you would not stay in the United States for half a second if things got any worse, because the world is an amazing place. And I always know people are ignorant when people say, why do you live in Romania? I live in the Americas, the best country in the world. Why do you live in Romania? You're American. Why don't you live here? I'm like, have you ever been to Romania? They're like, no. There you go. Bucharest is better than most American cities for lots of different reasons. And American cities have their advantages, and Bucharest has its advantage. In terms of safety, it's safer than any American city ever. Any American city in the United States, Bucharest is safer than. So, you can't make the leap of faith to do something different with your life if you are completely in the dark about what's out there.